The great orrery of worlds spun silently in the heart of the concordance chamber, a slow, majestic dance of 1,000 suns captured in hard light. Each point of brilliance represented a member civilization, a star system brought into the stable, harmonious fold. But tonight, one star, a solitary yellow speck on the far spiral arm, pulsed with an angry, insistent red. It was a world unnamed by their cartographers, a place of primitive broadcasts and chaotic energy signatures, known to its inhabitants as Earth. Around the orrery, on tiered daises of polished obsidian that seemed to drink the light of the chamber, sat the delegates. They were a tapestry of galactic life, the crystalline Luminians who communed in resonating frequencies, the hulking, carapaced Glyptons whose every gesture was a display of martial pride, and Kalen of the Vexthali whose slender, silver-skinned form was still, his mind a turbulent sea within the calm ocean of his species, collective consciousness, the weave. He felt the chamber's emotional currents as physical things, the Glyptons' simmering impatience, the Luminians' cold, analytical curiosity, and a pervasive, underlying current of fear that bound them all. High Lord Valerius of the Glypton Imperium rose, his massive frame casting a long, intimidating shadow across the polished floor. His voice, a low grinding of stone on stone, echoed in the vaulted space, amplified by the chamber's ancient acoustics. For cycles we have observed this anomaly, this humanity. The word was spoken like an infestation. We have watched their chaotic expansion within their own system, a blind, cancerous growth. Their world bleeds noise into the void, signals of conflict, of tribalism, of ceaseless, pointless aggression. They have harnessed the atom, yet they use it to posture and threaten one another. They have reached their moon, yet they treat it as another conquest, another piece of territory to be claimed. They are a species caught in a perpetual state of infancy, yet they wield the tools of planetary destruction. He gestured a clawed hand toward the pulsing red light of Sol. They are a variable we cannot afford. A contagion that, if allowed to fester and break the quarantine of its own gravity well, will inevitably spread its sickness to the stable systems of the concordance. Kalen closed his eyes, sinking deeper into the weave. He could feel the ascent ripple through the other delegates. Valerius's words were simple, powerful, and played upon their deepest anxieties, the fear of the unknown, the disruption of order. The concordance was a monument to stability, an alliance born from the ashes of ancient, devastating wars. Its primary directive was the preservation of that peace, and humanity, by its very nature, appeared to be the antithesis of it. They were loud, unpredictable, and violent. The evidence was irrefutable, transmitted across the light years in a cacophony of electromagnetic radiation. Oracle IX, the designated speaker for the Luminians, shimmered into focus on its dais. Its form was a column of swirling, iridescent light, its voice a series of perfectly synthesized melodic tones. The data corroborates High Lord Valerius's assessment, it chimed, its logic cold and precise. Our deep-range scans confirm exponential technological growth, yet no corresponding evolution in social cohesion. Their energy expenditure is wildly inefficient, broadcasting waste heat and radiation signatures consistent with primitive fission and combustion. Their orbital space is cluttered with debris, a testament to their carelessness. Projections indicate a 93.7% probability that, should they achieve interstellar travel within the next 1,000 cycles, their first contact protocols will be aggressive, driven by resource acquisition and territorial dispute. The Luminians dealt in probabilities, not morals. To them, humanity was a statistical certainty of future conflict. Kalen felt a profound weariness settle over him. He had seen this before. The same logic, the same fear-driven calculus, had been used to justify the pacification of the Genar, the sterilization of the Fenrir system. The concordance, in its pursuit of absolute peace, had become ruthlessly efficient at excising anything that threatened it. He opened his eyes and rose, his simple gray robes a stark contrast to the ornate battle plate of the Glypton High Lord. His voice was not loud, but it carried a resonance that seemed to quiet the chamber's agitated energies, a product of the Vexthali's subtle psionic influence. Venerable delegates, Kalen began, his gaze sweeping across the assembly. High Lord Valerius speaks of chaos, Oracle IX speaks of probability. I ask you to consider a third possibility, complexity. He gestured not to the angry red light of Sol, but to the vast, empty spaces between the stars in the orrery. We have grown accustomed to the silence of the void, to the predictable orbits of our worlds and the orderly hum of our civilizations. We have forgotten that life itself is not a neat equation. It is messy, contradictory, and often frightening in its potential. You say the humans broadcast noise. I have listened to these signals, not with sensors that measure amplitude and frequency, but through the deeper lens of the weave. And within that noise, I have felt more than just conflict. He paused, letting the silence stretch. I have felt symphonies of profound mathematical beauty. I have felt philosophical debates that question the very nature of existence, questions we ourselves stopped asking eons ago. I have felt stories of love, of sacrifice, of courage in the face of their own mortality. A mortality so brief, so fleeting, it is a wonder they accomplish anything at all. You see a cacophony, I see a chorus, a billion voices singing their own song at once. He turned his gaze to Valerius. You call their expansion cancerous, but is not all life driven to expand, to fill the space it is given? The difference, perhaps, is that they do so with a fierce, desperate passion we have long since tempered into cold pragmatism. They are not us, and that, I believe, is what truly frightens you. Valerius slammed a fist onto his dais, the sound cracking through the chamber like a tectonic fracture. Philosophy will not protect us from their kinetic weapons. Empathy will not shield our worlds from their inherent aggression. They are a broken people, a flawed design. They turn their tools of creation into weapons against themselves. What do you think they will do with those same tools when they turn them upon us? We have a duty, a sacred obligation, to cauterize this wound before it infects the galactic body. The sentiment was met with a low rumble of agreement from the other Glypton delegates, and a murmur of assent from several other species. Kalen held his ground, his calm a stark counterpoint to the Glypton's fury. A wound, High Lord, or a birth, we are ancient. We have seen civilizations rise and fall. We have grown placid, certain in our wisdom. Perhaps we have forgotten the fire of youth. Perhaps we have forgotten the struggle that forges strength. To intervene now, to silence them before they have even had a chance to speak to the galaxy on their own terms, is not an act of preservation. It is an act of supreme arrogance. It is a declaration that our way is the only way, that our peace is the only peace worth having. The debate raged for hours, a storm of logic, fear, and ideology. The Luminians presented more data, more projections of war, of contamination, of destabilization. The Glyptons spoke of honor, of duty, of the necessity of preemptive action. Kalen and the few who sided with him argued for patience, for observation, for the moral imperative of non-interference. But the tide was against them. The image of humanity, painted by Valerius and backed by the cold calculus of the Luminians, was too potent. They were a threat, a chaotic element in a galaxy that craved order above all else. Finally, the Archon of the Concordance, a being of pure thought who existed only as a pattern of light within a containment field at the chamber's apex, called for the vote. The great orrery dimmed, and the light of each delegation's dais began to glow, signifying their readiness. Kalen felt a cold dread coalesce in his spirit. He knew what was coming. The fear was too strong. The logic, however flawed, was too compelling. The desire for a simple solution to a complex problem was too seductive. The motion before the council, the Archon's voice resonated without source within every mind, is the pacification of the star system designated Sol, to neutralize the nascent threat posed by the species known as humanity. A vote of accord will authorize the deployment of a Glypton-led purification fleet under the authority of the Concordance. A vote of discord will mandate a cycle of continued non-contact observation. Let the will of the Concordance be known. The lights on the daises shifted, one by one. Amber for abstention, blue for discord, crimson for accord. Kalen's dais glowed a defiant, lonely blue. A few others joined him. But the chamber was overwhelmingly awash in the blood-red light of accord. Crimson from the Glyptons, a foregone conclusion. Crimson from the Luminians, their decision dictated by probability. Crimson from the species bordering the Perseus arm, their proximity breeding fear. Crimson, 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 until the entire chamber throbbed with a malevolent, unified glow. The Archon's voice returned, devoid of emotion. The vote is carried, the motion is approved, the Sol system will be pacified. High Lord Valerius stood tall, his posture radiating a grim satisfaction. He looked across the chamber at Kalen, his multifaceted eyes glittering with triumph. It was not just a political victory, it was an ideological one. The Concordance had chosen the path of strength, of certainty. They had chosen to act. This, Kalen knew, was the peak of their hubris, the zenith of their self-assurance. He could feel it in the weave, a vast, collective wave of relief and resolve. The decision was made. The threat would be eliminated. The galaxy would be safe. A fatal confidence settled over the chamber, as heavy and as suffocating as a shroud. Kalen lowered his head, not in defeat, but in mourning. He mourned not for the humans, for he did not know what they were truly capable of. He mourned for the concordance, for he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to his core, that it had just made a mistake of historic, and perhaps terminal, proportions. The Glypton fleet translated from hyperspace with the silent, brutal elegance of a predator revealing itself. Vast, angular vessels of obsidian alloy emerged from rips in spacetime, their forms designed to inspire terror. They were mountains of metal and energy, bristling with weapon emplacements that could crack continents and boil away oceans. At the heart of the formation was the indomitous High Lord Valerius's personal flagship, a vessel so large it distorted the local gravity around it. They materialized at the edge of the Sol system, beyond the orbit of the last gas giant, a position chosen for maximum strategic advantage. Below them, a distant, pale blue marble hung in the blackness, utterly oblivious, utterly vulnerable. Aboard the Indomitus, Valerius stood on the command dais, his reflection captured in the polished, meter-thick transparency of the viewing portal. The blue world was a satisfyingly small speck. His confidence, forged in 100 campaigns, was absolute. The plan was simple, efficient, and in his view, merciful. A swift, overwhelming show of force. They would disable the planet's orbital weapon platforms, crude kinetic launchers and fission-based warheads according to their intelligence, and then issue their terms. Disarmament, submission to concordance oversight, the end of their chaotic, self-destructive path. It was not conquest, it was surgery, a necessary excision. Status of the target system? Valerius's voice boomed across the bridge. Lord, the system is quiet, the tactical officer reported, its chitinous mandibles clicking in confusion. The chaotic electromagnetic radiation we observed has ceased. All frequencies are silent except for a single low-power carrier wave. Valerius felt the first faint prickle of unease. Silence was not what he had expected. He had anticipated panic, a flurry of terrified broadcasts, the launch of their primitive missiles, a futile, chaotic defense. This silence was unnatural. It was disciplined. Are they attempting to hide from us? Another officer posited. Impossible, the tactical officer countered. Our mass is bending spacetime across the entire system. They know we are here. They have known since the moment we arrived. Valerius stared at the distant blue world. The silence felt less like fear and more like patience. As if they were being watched, measured. He dismissed the thought as fanciful. They were primitives. Their silence was born of shock, nothing more. Ignore the carrier wave. Target their orbital defenses. A surgical strike. Disable, do not destroy. Let them see the futility of resistance, Valerius commanded. The weapon arrays on the Glypton fleet began to glow, charging with energies that drew power directly from the quantum foam. Target locks, precise to the millimeter, settled on the dozens of satellites and small space stations orbiting Earth. It would be over in seconds. A clean, undeniable demonstration of their superiority. And then it happened. Before the Glypton weapons could fire, a new signal emerged. It was not broadcast from the planet's surface, but from all points in the system at once. It was not a language of sound or light, but a direct, conceptual transmission, a message impressed upon the fabric of reality itself. It bypassed their communication systems entirely, manifesting as pure understanding in the minds of every sentient being on every ship in the Glypton fleet. We are humanity, we see you. Your presence is acknowledged. We do not wish for conflict. We invite you to speak. The message was calm. It was not a plea, not a surrender, not a threat. It was an invitation, delivered with the serene confidence of a host welcoming an unexpected guest. On the bridge of the Indomitus, a stunned silence fell. The Glypton officers stared at each other, their hardened military certainty dissolving into confusion. Valerius felt a jolt, as if the ground had shifted beneath his feet. A conceptual transmission of that clarity and scope was a technology far beyond what the concordance possessed. It was a feat of psionics or physics so advanced as to be indistinguishable from magic. What was that? Valerius demanded, his voice losing its customary iron. Source of the transmission. Everywhere, High Lord, the tactical officer stammered. The signal has no point of origin, it simply is. It permeates the entire system. A cold dread began to seep into Valerius's mind. The primitives were communicating in a way he couldn't comprehend. He looked again at the small blue world, and it no longer seemed small or vulnerable. It seemed ancient and quiet and terribly vast. Before he could issue another command, another change occurred. From behind the dark side of Earth, a single vessel emerged. It was not large, perhaps the size of a Glypton frigate, but its design was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was a simple, elegant shape, a smooth, featureless teardrop of a material that did not reflect the light of the distant sun, but seemed to absorb it, leaving a hole in the starfield. It had no visible weapon ports, no engine signatures, no sensor arrays. It moved with an impossible grace, accelerating toward the Glypton fleet without any apparent means of propulsion. "Lord, the vessel is approaching," the tactical officer reported, his voice tight with alarm. "It is not emitting any energy signatures, no drive field, no power core readings. It is a void on our sensors." Valerius stared at the approaching ship. His military instincts screamed at him. An unknown vessel, moving with impossible technology, approaching his fleet after delivering an incomprehensible message. Every fiber of his being told him to destroy it. But the message had been an invitation to speak. And the serene, unnerving calm of it all stayed his hand. This was not the behavior of a cornered animal. This was the behavior of something that held all the cards. The human ship came to a stop at a respectful distance from the Indomitus. And then another conceptual message, clear and precise, filled their minds. "We will send an envoy. We ask that you receive her. She will come aboard your vessel if you guarantee her safety." Valerius was caught in a trap of his own making. To refuse would be an admission of fear. To accept was to allow an unknown element onto his flagship. But his pride, his warrior's code, left him no choice. To show fear in the face of this enigma was unthinkable. "Acknowledge," Valerius commanded, his voice a low growl. "Guarantee her safety, but have all internal security on highest alert. I will meet this envoy myself." The meeting took place in the Indomitus's primary audience chamber, a cavernous hall designed to awe and intimidate. Valerius stood on a raised dais, flanked by his most elite guards in full ceremonial armor. He had expected the human envoy to be a soldier, or perhaps some kind of psionic adept. He was not prepared for the woman who walked into the chamber, alone and unescorted. She was of average height for her species, clad in a simple dark blue uniform that bore no rank or insignia. Her hair was dark, her face composed, and her eyes, a shade of deep brown, held a profound and unsettling stillness. There was no fear in her posture, no arrogance, only a quiet, observant calm. She walked to the center of the chamber and stopped, her gaze meeting Valerius's directly. "I am Ambassador Aris Thorn," she said, her voice clear and steady. The words were not spoken in the Glypton tongue, yet Valerius and his guards understood them perfectly. The translation was flawless, woven directly into the sound. "I am High Lord Valerius of the Glypton Imperium, acting on the authority of the Galactic Concordance," he replied, his voice a tool of intimidation. "You are addressing the commander of this fleet, a fleet, I might add, that has come to pacify your world and bring it into compliance with galactic law." The human, Aris Thorn, did not react. She merely inclined her head slightly. "I understand your stated purpose. I am here to explain why that course of action is both unnecessary and unwise." Valerius laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Unwise? Your world is in chaos. Your technology is a threat to yourselves and, by extension, your neighbors. We have come to save you from your own self-destructive nature." "What you perceive as chaos," the ambassador replied, her voice remaining perfectly level, "is the friction of a complex, pluralistic society in constant growth. You see our internal conflicts as a weakness. We see them as the engine of our evolution, the crucible in which our ideas, our ethics, and our resolve are tested and forged." "Words," Valerius scoffed. "Your crucible has brought you to the brink of self-annihilation a dozen times in the last of your centuries. Your orbital weapons are proof of your aggression." "Our orbital weapons," she corrected gently, "are kinetic impactors, simple, solid objects. They are not armed with nuclear, biological, or radiological warheads. They are, in essence, rocks, very precisely guided rocks. They are a deterrent designed to be purely defensive. They cannot, by their nature, be used to threaten a world. They can only defend one." This gave Valerius pause. His intelligence reports had focused on the launch systems, not the payloads. The assumption had been that they were armed with the most destructive materials the humans possessed. "And your technology," he pressed, changing tactics. "Your noisy radio signals, your inefficient power sources, they speak of a species barely out of its cradle." Ambassador Thorn allowed a faint, almost imperceptible smile to touch her lips. "High Lord, you have made the classic observer's error. You have mistaken the part for the whole. You scanned our public broadcasts, the noise we make for ourselves. You did not and could not detect our actual communication network. It is a quantum-entangled system, instantaneous, undetectable. The noise is for our children, our artists, our storytellers. It is our culture, not our capability. She took a step forward, and the guards tensed. She ignored them, her eyes still locked on Valerius. As for our power sources, you detected the fission plants on our planet's surface. You did not detect the zero-point energy collectors that power this vessel and our hidden infrastructure. We learned long ago that overt displays of power invite conflict, so we chose a different path. We chose to appear unassuming, to be underestimated. It is a far more effective defense than a fleet of warships. Every word she spoke chipped away at the foundation of Valerius's reality. The fatal confidence that had filled the concordance chamber now felt like a fool's delusion. He had led a fleet to chastise a child, only to find himself standing before a giant that had been pretending to be small. Why, Valerius asked, the single word a raw admission of his confusion. Why the deception? It is not a deception, the ambassador replied calmly. It is a philosophy, and it is one we learned through a lesson written in the very soil of our solar system. A lesson you and the concordance must now understand if we are to have a future. She raised her hand, and a small, silver device materialized in her palm. With your permission, High Lord, I would like to show you something. I would like to show you why humanity is the way it is. Valerius stared at the woman, at the unnerving calm in her eyes. His mission was in ruins. His understanding of the galaxy was fracturing, but he had to know. He had to see. He gave a curt, sharp nod of assent. The human ambassador pressed the device, and the great, intimidating audience chamber of the Indomitus dissolved into a field of stars. Holographic projection that bloomed in the chamber was not of Earth. It was of Mars, the fourth planet in their system. But it was not the cold, red desert the Glypton probes had scanned. This was Mars as it had been a billion years before. It was a world of shimmering blue oceans, green continents, and cities that defied imagination. Crystalline spires scraped the clouds, connected by ribbons of light. The sheer scale of the civilization was breathtaking, dwarfing anything the Concordance had ever built. We called them the Firstborn, Ambassador Thorne's voice explained, soft but resonant in the simulated world. They were the first sentient life in our solar system, brilliant, powerful, ambitious. The projection shifted, moving through the alien cities. Valerius saw the inhabitants, tall, graceful beings, not unlike the Vexthali in their slender forms, but with an aura of immense pride and power. Their technology was seamless, integrated into their very existence. They commanded energies that the Concordance could only dream of. They were conquerors, Thorne continued, her voice taking on a somber tone. Like your Glypton Imperium, they believed in their manifest destiny to rule the stars. They saw the galaxy as a resource to be claimed, lesser species as subjects to be governed. They built a mighty fleet and prepared to launch their great expansion. The projection pulled back, showing the Martian fleet assembling in orbit. It was a fleet that would have dwarfed Valerius's own, a collection of world killers and starbreakers, the ultimate expression of a civilization's power and arrogance. But they never left, Thorne said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Before they could begin their conquest, something found them. The simulation changed again. The perspective shifted to a deep space sensor array looking out into the void beyond the system. At first, there was nothing. Then a subtle distortion. A patch of space where the stars seemed to wink out, a growing darkness that did not radiate but absorbed. It was not a fleet. It was a presence, a wave of nothingness. We do not know what it was, Thorne said. The Firstborn's records are fragmented, corrupted by what came next. They called it the Silence. It was not a weapon. It was a condition, a fundamental alteration of reality. It moved at translight speeds and it simply erased them. The projection zoomed back to Mars. The wave of silence washed over the planet. There were no explosions, no fire, no screams. The crystalline cities just stopped glowing. The ribbons of light winked out. The life signs vanished in an instant. The oceans began to boil away into a thinning atmosphere. In a matter of minutes, the vibrant, living world was rendered sterile, its immense civilization reduced to silent ruins and fading ghosts of radiation. The entire fleet in orbit, with all its unimaginable power, simply ceased to exist. The hologram faded, returning the chamber to its cold, metallic reality. Valerius was shaking. The raw, existential horror of what he had just witnessed was a physical blow. The elite guards around him were frozen, their ceremonial weapons seeming like children's toys. When humanity first reached Mars, Ambassador Thorne said, her voice pulling them back from the abyss of the past, we found their ruins, We found their final, desperate warnings. We spent centuries deciphering their records, learning their science, and most importantly, understanding their mistake. Their confidence was their doom. Their power was a beacon that attracted something ancient and terrible from the dark between galaxies. She looked directly at Valerius, and for the first time he saw not just calm, but a profound sadness in her eyes, the sorrow of a people who carried an unbearable burden. Our entire civilization has been shaped by that one terrible discovery. We chose to be quiet. We chose to be underestimated. Our primitive technology, our internal squabbles, our chaotic broadcasts, much of it is a deliberate camouflage. A mask to hide our true nature from whatever is still listening out there in the dark. We built our strength in silence, not for conquest, but for a war we pray never comes, a war of survival. She gestured to the space around them. Your arrival, High Lord, was the greatest threat we have faced in 1,000 years, not because of your weapons, but because your attack would have forced us to reveal ourselves. It would have forced us to use our true capabilities, to light a fire in the void that could draw the attention of the silence once more. You were about to ring a dinner bell for a predator that consumes civilizations. The fatal confidence of the Concordance lay in shattered ruins at Valerius's feet. Their vote to invade, their arrogant assessment of humanity, was not just a mistake. It was an act of galactic-level recklessness. They had nearly doomed not only humanity, but potentially every species in the Concordance by forcing their hand. We did not know, Valerius said, the words a hollow rasp. It was the only thing he could say, an admission of ignorance so profound it was a confession of guilt. No, Ambassador Thorne agreed, her tone softening with something that might have been pity. You did not. That is why I am here, not to threaten you, not to demand your surrender, but to offer you a choice. She paused, letting the weight of the moment settle in the vast, silent chamber. The firstborn were alone, we do not have to be. We invite the Concordance to stand with us, to learn what we have learned, to prepare for the true enemy. The choice is no longer about pacifying Earth. It is about surviving the galaxy. Kalen stood before the reconvened Concordance Council. The chamber was the same, but the atmosphere was transformed. The arrogant certainty was gone, replaced by a stunned, fearful silence. High Lord Valerius stood beside him, his posture no longer that of a conqueror, but of a chastened witness. He had already given his report, his words stark and unvarnished, recounting everything he had seen and heard. The hologram of the firstborn's demise had been played for the entire assembly, and its chilling effect was palpable. The fatal confidence had not just been shattered. It had been atomized, replaced with a primal dread that transcended species. Now it was Kalen's turn to speak. He had met with Ambassador Thorne himself aboard the human vessel, the Odyssey. The experience had changed him. He had expected to find a hidden military power, a sleeping giant. Instead, he had found a species of philosophers and engineers, of artists and scientists who had been forced by circumstance into the role of silent guardians. Their ship was not a warship. It was a library, a laboratory, a seed bank of cosmic knowledge. They were not warriors. They were custodians of a terrible truth. For millennia, we have defined ourselves by what we have built, Kalen began, his voice resonating with a new gravity. We have built an empire of peace, an edifice of order. We took pride in our stability and our wisdom. We looked out at the stars and believed we understood our place in them. Today, we learn that our grand edifice was built on the shore and the tide is coming in. We were not at the apex of galactic evolution. We were children, playing in the quiet season, unaware of the storm gathering over the horizon. He looked around the chamber, meeting the gazes of the delegates. The Luminians flickered with agitated light, their probabilistic models shattered by an unforeseen variable of unimaginable magnitude. The other Glyptons stood rigid, their martial pride replaced by a grim, unfamiliar humility. Humanity is not the threat we perceived. They are the messengers, the watchmen on the wall we did not even know existed. Their chaos was a shield. Their silence was a discipline born of profound and terrible knowledge. We voted to punish them for their nature when we should have been trying to understand it. We saw a flaw to be corrected when we should have seen a strength we desperately lack. He extended a hand toward the center of the chamber, where the human ambassador, Aris Thorne, now stood by invitation, a calm, solitary figure amidst the diverse assembly. They have offered us a partnership, not as subjects, not as a conquered people, but as equals. They offer to share their knowledge, their technology, their burden. They ask for nothing in return except that we stand with them, that we listen, and that we prepare. A delegate from a lesser species, a silicon-based life form whose people valued geological time scales, spoke up, its voice a slow, grinding vibration. Prepare for what? This? Silence! It happened a billion years ago. The threat may be gone. Ambassador Thorne stepped forward, her quiet presence commanding the full attention of the chamber. We do not believe it is gone. The records of the firstborn, though fragmented, contained astronomical data. They were tracking the source. It was not a random event. It was directed. And the patterns in deep space energy readings, patterns so faint that they are almost indistinguishable from cosmic background radiation, suggest that its cycle of activity is not over. It is merely dormant. She gestured, and the great orrery of worlds transformed. The map expanded, pushing beyond the boundaries of their galaxy into the crushing emptiness of intergalactic space. A faint, almost subliminal signal pattern was highlighted, emanating from a region of absolute blackness designated only by coordinates. This is a signal we have been monitoring for decades, Thorne explained. It is incredibly ancient, structured with a complexity that suggests an intelligence beyond our comprehension. For most of our history, it was a steady, repeating pulse like a slow heartbeat, a sleeper's breath. Her expression became grave. Since your fleet arrived in our system and began charging its weapons, the signal has changed. The tempo has increased. The complexity of the message has shifted. A chilling realization swept through the chamber. The deployment of the Glypton fleet, the massive expenditure of energy, had acted as a flare in the darkness. They had not only threatened humanity, they had potentially alerted the very thing humanity had spent its entire existence hiding from. It is listening, Thorne stated, the simple words landing with the force of a physical impact. It heard your advance. It heard the energy of your weapons. We believe it is waking up. Your vote to invade our world may have inadvertently hastened the very doom you sought to prevent. The silence that followed was absolute, a crushing weight of shared culpability. The Concordance, in its arrogance, had stumbled onto the stage of a cosmic drama it was not prepared for, and in doing so, had roused a sleeping god. Valerius, the proud High Lord, took a step forward and bowed his head before the human ambassador, a gesture of submission so profound it sent shockwaves of disbelief through the Glypton delegation. We have been fools, he said, his voice raw with shame. Our pride has endangered us all. The Glypton Imperium, my people, we will accept your offer. We will stand with you. Command us. Thorne shook her head gently. We will not command you, High Lord. We will work with you. This is a burden we must all share now. The age of empires is over. The age of survival has begun. The vote was called again, but this time the motion was different. It was a motion to form a new alliance, a unified front between the Concordance and the isolated species of Earth. A motion to share all knowledge, combine all resources, and prepare for a war against the encroaching dark. One by one, the lights on the daises shifted. Blue, the deep, unified blue of accord. Not a single delegate voted against it. The crimson of war had been replaced by the solemn blue of unity. In the aftermath, as the delegates began the monumental task of merging their two civilizations, Kalen stood with Eris Thorne before the orrery, which now displayed the unknown signal from the void. It pulsed a little faster now, a little brighter. It felt malevolent, hungry. I confess, Kalen said, his mind touching Thorne as through a delicate extension of the weave, a sign of ultimate trust. I feel a fear unlike any I have ever known. It is a rational fear, Eris replied, her thoughts clear and calm in his mind. We have lived with it for centuries. It is what keeps us sharp. It is what reminds us of what we are fighting for. And what is that? Kalen asked. What do we fight for against such an overwhelming oblivion? Eris Thorne turned her gaze from the terrifying signal and looked at the orrery, at the 1,000 points of light representing the worlds of the Concordance, and at the single bright speck of Earth, no longer an angry red, but a steady, hopeful white. We fight for the chorus, she said softly. For every song, every story, every question, we fight for the beautiful, terrible, glorious noise that life makes. The silence hates that noise. We will not let it be extinguished. Kalen looked at the human ambassador, a representative of a species they had so foolishly underestimated, a species that had carried the galaxy's heaviest secret in silence. He saw no fear in her now, only a resolve as deep and as unyielding as gravity. The dread in his own heart began to recede, replaced by something new, something he had not felt in a very long time. It was the fire of youth, the thrill of a struggle that mattered. Humanity had not just saved itself from the Concordance's fatal confidence. It had given the ancient, tired galaxy a new and terrible purpose. They were no longer just guardians of a fragile peace. They were now the defenders of existence itself, standing shoulder to shoulder against the coming night. And for the first time in a very long time, the future felt vast and dangerous and truly, profoundly alive.